Our story begins in the early 1900s when the monarchy of Iran sold off Iran's natural resources for personal gain. These resources were sold to foreign powers, mainly the British. The British held major stakes in Iran's industries, including banking, mineral prospecting, the tobacco industry, as well as exclusive access to trade along the Karun River, which was Iran's only navigable waterway. More than anything else, they had full control of Iran's oil. This was done through a company called the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which today you'll find is known as BP. The Iranian people slowly became resentful about the deals the country was making, so they eventually challenged the monarchy and established a parliament referred to as the Majlis to go along with the monarchy. This meant elections for the first time in Iranian history. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company was extremely profitable for the British Empire. They controlled the drilling, refinement, and sale of all Iranian oil. They only had to give 16% of the profits to the Iranian government. To make matters worse, the Iranians were not allowed to look at the financial statements for the oil company, so theoretically, the British could pay any amount they wanted. Iran's resources were being taken from them. By the time the 1950s rolled around, it was extremely popular to oppose British imperialism in Iran. Nobody embodied this movement more than Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh was a popular parliamentarian who had received a PhD in Europe earlier in his life. Many Iranians considered him to have been the leading champion of secular democracy, as well as the #1 proponent of oil nationalization in the country. Prime Minister Mossadegh was so popular in the country and around the world that he was named Time magazine's Man of the Year in 1951. Workers within the oil industry faced harsh working conditions. The Iranian citizens did all the work while the British elite made all the profit. The Americans had a deal with the Saudis where they split the profits of the oil industry 50-50. This made the 16% the Iranians were getting from the British seem like chump change. Years of turmoil and social unrest finally came to a head in 1951. The Majlis voted 79-12 for Mohammad Mossadegh to be prime minister of the country. That very same afternoon, the Majlis voted unanimously to nationalize the oil industry, effectively ending the existence of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. The British were stunned. Iran was their main source of oil. During World War II, they received much of their oil from Iran to fuel their military equipment. The British felt as though their company was being stolen from them. They quickly filed complaints with the United Nations and took up a case with an international court. It was easy for them to overlook the fact that they had just themselves recently nationalized their own coal and steel industries. Mossadegh was extremely popular with the average Iranian. He freed peasants from forced labor. He ordered factories to provide medical care for workers. He established a system of unemployment benefits, all while taxing landlords to fund public projects. Negotiation was not an option for Prime Minister Mossadegh. Nationalization of the oil industry was non-negotiable. He was going to do what was best for the Iranian people, not what was best for the British oligarchs. Britain, seeing the writing on the wall, had at one point considered a possible invasion. They pled with the U.S. to get involved. The Truman administration was adamant that this was an issue that didn't involve them. They tried to negotiate with the Iranians on behalf of the British, but they refused any action that led toward overthrowing the popular Iranian leader. Eventually, in 1952, Mossadegh dissolved the British embassy and expelled all British diplomats from the country. This ruined any chance for the Brits to stage a coup d'etat. After expelling British diplomats from the country, it seemed like Iran had won. Their people could now reap the benefits of their country's own resources. Finally, things were looking up. That is, until Dwight Eisenhower won the election in 1952. Eisenhower took office early in 1953. He appointed John Foster Dulles as his Secretary of State and his brother Allen Dulles as head of the CIA. Never before or since have two brothers led the State Department and the CIA at the same time. They were born into an extremely wealthy family and can actually trace their family lineage all the way back to Charlemagne. They both had long careers consulting the world's richest corporations. John Dulles actually ran for Senate in 1949 with an extremely anti-communist campaign, although he lost. The Dulles brothers were very privileged, very well connected, and very anti-communist, all three traits needed to do the bidding of the Washington establishment. The Eisenhower administration was much more willing to help the Brits overthrow Iran than Truman was. In fact, the only person within the administration who was unsure about the coup was President Eisenhower himself. He wanted to make a deal with the Iranians, but his cabinet insisted that regime change was the only plausible way to deal with the situation. The Eisenhower administration decided to overthrow Mossadegh for three main reasons. 1. They saw a huge opportunity for America to take control of Iranian oil for themselves. 2. They were extremely fearful of a highly exaggerated communist threat in Iran. And 3. Iran and Saudi Arabia are huge geopolitical adversaries, so an allegiance to the Saudis certainly played a supporting role in why Eisenhower decided to overthrow Mossadegh. The CIA decided it would be best to launch an intense propaganda campaign within Iran. The CIA set up a library in Tehran, which was the only free library in the city, in order to distribute propaganda. The CIA also had a show on the radio called The Voice of America that spread CIA propaganda. The CIA made or sponsored films, posters, radio shows, and books. Leading up to the coup, there was an intense propaganda campaign designed to turn the Iranian people against Prime Minister Mossadegh. They would portray Mossadegh as corrupt, pro-communist, and hostile to Islam. Even in extremely rural areas outside the city, the CIA set up educational programs and pro-American development programs. The CIA placed at least 260 articles, editorials, or commentaries in Tehran newspapers. They had no less than 20 newspapers on payroll. Newspapers, members of parliament, religious leaders, business merchants, military leaders, and police were on the CIA's payroll. A lot of the CIA's contacts actually came from the British. The British had a vast array of contacts within Iran because they had done business there for half a century. The British intelligence agencies worked alongside the CIA to carry out the coup. But no matter how deep the web of elite connections was for the CIA, they were never going to be able to pull off this coup without the support of the Shah. Even though Iran had a parliament and a prime minister, the monarchy still had some legal powers in Iran. The CIA spent months trying to persuade a very reluctant Shah to remove the prime minister and name military leader General Zahedi as his replacement. Their chance came in July 1953. Mossadegh held a referendum to dissolve the parliament. Without a parliament in session, the Shah wouldn't need their approval to remove the prime minister. The CIA took the chance to unleash thousands of paid demonstrators that would hold anti-government rallies. CIA operatives posing as Mossadegh supporters threatened Muslim leaders. Propaganda was printed off the CIA press and rushed to the papers. The Shah signed a decree to officially name General Zahedi as the new Prime Minister of Iran. Nobody in Iran even stopped to ask if this was a legal move for the Shah to do while the parliament wasn't in session. The CIA took the decree, which is also known as a firman, and made copies. They distributed them all over the country and printed them in Iranian newspapers. The removal of Mossadegh was announced on a CIA-sponsored radio station in Tehran. Eventually, on August 19, 1953, military and police agents descended upon Mossadegh and arrested him for his refusal to step down as prime minister. There was a trial held for Mossadegh. He was found guilty and was sentenced to live under house arrest for the rest of his life. Many supporters of Mossadegh in the Majlis and military were also arrested for various offenses. For decades after the coup, Iran was ruled by an undemocratic dictatorship. The United States took control of 40% of Iranian oil, while the British took back another 40%. The Shah was an American puppet and ruled with an iron fist. It wasn't until 25 years later, in 1979, when the Iranian people finally overthrew the Shah and banished him from the country. They ended the monarchy and established an Islamic republic, which continues to be their current form of government today. For many years, the CIA denied any involvement in the coup that took place in Iran in 1953, but in 2013, a Freedom of Information Act request forced the CIA to release hundreds of pages worth of documents. Not only did the CIA take part in the coup d'etat, they orchestrated and executed the coup against the will of the Iranian people, overthrowing a democratically elected leader only to replace him with a dictator that was going to be subservient to U.S. interests rather than the will of the people. Hey, so if you enjoyed this video essay, please like and subscribe down below. This was my first real long form video essay, so these are going to get better as I go. I'm also going to leave the sources I use in the description. It was basically just the leaks from the CIA that came out in 2013, 2 books by Kinzer, and a Google Scholar article. So those are my sources. Going to leave that down below. And please make sure you subscribe. Thank you so much.